It was a Thursday. Just a Thursday. I was working in my dad's gas station. Something I had done ever since I was in high school. After school, I'd go and I'd work selling people soda and corn nuts and Funyuns. But since I had graduated from high school, it was pretty much what I'd been doing full time. It wasn't exactly my dream job, but I didn't hate it. It was fine. I got some money. But the thing was that I knew one day it would all be mine. Well, mine and my brother's. It was just a Thursday. But that Thursday changed when a carload of my friends pull up. I'm just standing behind the counter, just killing time, and they come busting in with this idea for a road trip. Where do you think they wanted to go? Vegas. They're like, come on, man, you got to come with us. And I'm like, whoa, I'm watching the shop. I can't go. They're like, come on, you don't want to miss this. And I didn't want to miss it. I mean, this was obviously, okay, this is going to be fun, all right. But I asked them, I'm like, what are you going to do for money? And they explained, well, Steve's got $20, Tommy's got, I don't know, Tommy's cheap. I don't know what he's got. And they start telling me they got a little bit of money, but they're like, dude, you're the one with the money. I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't have money. I'm like, what are you talking about? Your dad owns this place. This is all going to be yours. There's money back in the safe. Well, this is true. And technically, half of it is mine anyway. And man, they made Vegas sound like a good time. I'm just like, oh, I don't want to miss this, you guys. Finally, they totally talked me into it. And I went back into the office. I kneeled down next to the safe. I dialed in the code, and I opened it up. And the amount of cash in this safe, actually, it startled me to see the stacks of cash. And I just took a deep breath, and I took half of each stack. I put it in one of those cheap plastic bags that we put people's junk food in. I spun it so it was closed and secure. I locked up the safe. I walked out of the office, closed the door behind me. I stopped by the counter and I grabbed a notepad and a pen. I was going to leave a note for my dad, just letting him know, hey, you know what? I need to be on my own for a while. I mean, I'm getting older now, and I just want to be on my own. And as I started to write, Dear Dad, that bell that we had hanging on the door clanged. And I looked up, and my dad walked in. We just sort of stared at each other. He knew what I was doing, and I knew he knew what I was doing. And so we sort of just stood there, stared at each other. I didn't know what to say, so I just sort of rushed past him. I ran out to my friend's car, I hopped in the car, and we drove off to Vegas. You can guess the rest of the story. We lived it up. We did anything we wanted to do. We stayed in the nicest hotels. We ate at the nicest restaurants. We gambled. We hung out. Oh my gosh, it was unbelievable. And then it ended. That bag of money that seemed to be bottomless was empty. Now, somebody without any money isn't typically the most popular guy in town. And so all these new friends I had made, they were gone. And I looked around and I realized what I had done. I realized what I had done to my dad. I realized what I had done to my life. And I was stuck. There's no way I could go home. My dad's not going to let me come back after taking all that I took. He's not going to just let me come back. But staying here, what was I going to do? I didn't have anywhere to live. I didn't have a job. So over the next little bit of time, I just sort of slept wherever I could find a bench, sort of just wandered around town. Eventually, I found a job emptying the bacon grease fat out behind the Palms Hotel. Paid nothing, certainly not enough to live in Vegas. And I realized I was out of options. I mean, even the guys who worked back at the gas station were making more money than me. And at least there, like, they knew some people and they had some friends, and I had nothing. But how could I go back? There was no way. And I decided maybe if I just go back and I tell my dad, you know what, just treat me like one of your employees. Just, I'll sleep in the room at the back of the gas station, just that little shed that we had back there that we stored extra candy bars in. He can pay me minimum wage. Maybe, I don't know. So I decided to go home. I was able to scrounge up some of my last paycheck, and I bought a bus ticket. And it dropped me off just down the street from my dad's gas station. And as I walked down the street, I was still probably 100 yards away, and I could see the gas station down at the end of the street. And as I looked down, I could see my dad through that big glass window we had at the front of the store. And I could see my dad was waiting on a long line of customers, selling them soda, corn nuts, and Funyuns. And I just stood there, and my heart was beating a mile a minute. And suddenly, my dad turned and he looked out that window. And he saw me standing down the street. My heart that was beating a mile a minute stopped. I'm looking down the window. I don't know what to do. I mean, what's appropriate here? Suddenly, my dad, who's not a young nor fit guy, leaps over the counter, leaves the cash register drawer wide open, and this long line of customers just standing there, and he comes blasting out that front door. That little bell on the door swinging and banging against everything, and he runs right at me. I don't know if he's chasing me away and I'm supposed to run. I don't know if he just wants to keep me away from the store so I don't embarrass him in front of all those people. Everybody at this point had heard. And he kept running at me, and I just stood there frozen. When he was about 50 feet away, what I saw was tears streaming down his face. And he kept running. And I stood there frozen, unsure of what was about to happen. When he got to me, he slammed into me, wrapped his arms around me, and just held on. The only reason we did not go falling to the ground is because my dad's kind of a scrawny guy. But he just held on. Well, this was a surprise. So I just kind of stood there as he squeezed me. And then after a moment, I felt my arms just kind of go up and wrap around him. And as I began to say, "I'm sorry," my words were drowned out by his sobs. I could feel his chest and his head heaving against my chest as he held on to me. I can tell you that was the longest hug I have ever experienced in my life. Right out there in the middle of the sidewalk. By now, that whole line of people that was standing waiting to buy Funyuns is outside, wanting to watch the show. After what must have been 3 or 4 hours, my dad let go. And he grabbed my hand and he said, "Come on." And we walked back to the store. People all standing around. And he introduced me to every single one of them. Said, "Hey, I want you to meet my son. He's been gone for quite a while, but he's home. My dad ducked inside real quick, inside the door, and right around the door, he grabbed this roll of paper, and he asked one of the people who was there to buy some Starburst, hey, help me put this up. And they unroll this sign, and it's a huge sign that says, welcome home, son. I looked around. There was no help wanted sign in the store. He hadn't hired anybody else. My dad had been working my shifts, just waiting for me to come home. Instead of rejection, I got love. Instead of anger and bitterness, I was held and I was cared for and I was received back. There was no sense that I was no longer part of the family. My dad absolutely wanted me home. He had been waiting. And all of the things that I had done, he was willing to forgive. And he was willing to accept me back. It's quite a father. It's quite a dad who's willing to do that. This is the story that Jesus told. This is the story that Jesus told to a bunch of people who were questioning why he was caring about the people around him who were making some really big mistakes, some really foolish choices. This is the story that we know as the prodigal son. And it's one of the parables that Jesus taught. And parables, like we've been talking about over the last several weeks, are not just for our enjoyment. It's not just, oh, wow, that was really moving. Wow, that was quite the tale. Parables are meant for us to learn something, for us to take a truth of God and apply it to our life, for us to consider what this means for me right here and right now. And before we go any further, I want to challenge you with that tonight. Whether you believe in God or not, whether you would call yourself a Christian here tonight or not, I want to challenge you to consider what is being taught by Jesus and how that applies to your life. What that means to you right here, right now, in 8th grade, 9th grade, 7th grade, 10th grade, whatever, wherever you're at. In a good home, in a bad home, things are going really well, things just are terrible. How does this apply to you, what we're going to look at here tonight? When we get into these situations like the son got into, made some really bad choices, got into some really hard situations, one of the things that he may be tempted to do, we may be tempted to do when we get into something difficult, is blame God. See, the son could have looked at the father and went, why'd you give me the money? Why did you let me go? Why didn't you stop me? And suddenly this becomes God's fault. Suddenly this becomes something where we focus our anger and our resentment and maybe our embarrassment over the things that we've done on God. Why would God let this happen? Why wouldn't God just stop this? Why would God allow me to continue to make this choice? But that is the Father's love for you. He does not want a robot. He does not want a puppet. He does not want to just control you and force you to love him and force you to follow his plan for you. He will allow us to make these choices. And he has given us everything we need in order to make wise choices, in order to have good discernment and to have wisdom. He's provided these things, but it's going to be up to us. But one of the things that we tend to do is blame God. Well, God could have stopped this. And one of the things that I know that I don't like to do very, very much or very well is consider, how have my choices got me to where I'm at? How have the decisions that I've made put me in this difficult situation? Now, I want to clarify that not every time you're in a difficult situation, I'm not saying, well, it's your fault. You made a dumb choice. There are things that happen to us that are not our fault. And you need to understand that. If you are being abused, if you are being violated, that is not because of anything that you have done. That is not because of a bad choice that you have made. If you are being bullied, that is not because you have done something to provoke it. It's not because you deserve it. And so I am not saying that if you find yourself in a difficult situation, you deserve it. What I am saying here is I want to bring us to a place where we make some choices. Are we willing to consider the decisions that we've made and how they have taken us to have brought us to this place where we're in a difficult situation? Are we willing to acknowledge, yeah, I was a knucklehead. Yeah, that was a bad decision. That was a really dumb thing to do. I hate to have to do that. I hate it when I make a mistake or when I intentionally do something and it makes life hard and I have to fess up to it. But one of the things that we tend to do is blame God. James 1:5 says this, if you lack wisdom, ask God for it. See, the Son never went to God and never went to the Father and said, what should I do? Hey, I really would like to go and just live it up. I'd really like to have my inheritance right now. What do you think? Give me some wisdom. He just felt like it and went for it. How often in your life do you feel like it and just go for it? God says, if any of you lacks wisdom, ask for it. If you don't know what to do, or if you have a hunch that this might not be good, are you willing to go to God? Is asking for wisdom part of your faith life? Is it part of something that you do? Where you're like, I want to know what God would have me do. I want wisdom. I want to know what I should be doing. Proverbs 15:22 says that without counsel, plans fail. But with many advisors, they succeed. Who are the counselors in your life? Who are the people that you go to and you're like, hey, I've been thinking about this. Do you think that this would be good for me? If you don't have one, get one. Get several. We have leaders here who would be absolutely willing to be some of those people who want to speak into your life. But many times we get into these situations because we haven't sought wisdom. We haven't sought counsel. We haven't asked God whether this is part of his plan or what he wants to do to bring life. We just do it. And then we blame God conveniently because we're stuck. Is asking for wisdom part of your faith life? Is it something that you do? Because God says, ask for wisdom. If you need it, when you need it, ask for it and he'll give it to you. The other thing that we tend to do when we make mistakes, in particular big mistakes, like we're like, oh my gosh, I totally blew it, is we avoid God. We come to this place. See, Jesus told this parable to the religious people who had gathered around because Jesus was standing and talking to, it says, tax collectors and sinners. Not sure why he differentiated those two groups, but tax collectors and sinners. Jesus was hanging out with them. He was talking to them. He was teaching them. He was telling them about God's love. And the religious leaders are like, whoa, 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 whoa. No. You can't be doing that. Those people don't deserve God. Those people don't deserve forgiveness. Those people don't deserve all the things that you're saying God feels for them. He doesn't. See, in their minds, there was a point of no return that you can cross where God no longer wants anything to do with you. I know, because I have felt it myself, I know that there are many of us in this room where there is something in your life, or there have been times in your life where you feel like you have crossed that point of no return. And God, you think that God isn't going to talk to you anymore, doesn't want you to pray to him anymore, doesn't care about you anymore, doesn't love you, that you are disqualified, that God's never going to be able to use you, that God's never going to bless you, that he's ashamed of you, that he's embarrassed of you. All the things that the son thought his dad was going to do if he tried to go home. This is what we struggle with when we make mistakes. We go, oh, God doesn't love me. I blew it too bad. And we get this idea in our minds that we have crossed some sort of line that's a point of no return. And let me tell you, that is exactly where Satan wants you. He does not want you going home. He wants you staying in the guilt and the shame and the feeling bad and the miserable life away from home. We get into this thinking where we have to avoid God. But when you screw up, do you believe that Matthew 11:28 applies to you? It says this, "Come to me, all you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." If you don't believe this applies to you, why would you go run into God? And so some of you don't. You think you have to stay back. You're allowed to come to youth group. But it's not really, you can't have a personal relationship with God. You can sing the songs, but the things in the songs, well, those are for people who haven't messed up as bad as you. And it's a lie. It's a lie that Satan wants you to continue to believe because it'll keep you from going home. Come to me, all you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I'll give you what? I'll give you rest. Some of you need rest. Some of you are desperate for rest because you've been sitting in the guilt and the shame and the hopelessness for way too long. You think that God wants you to just sit in it. You've convinced yourself that God wants you to just, oh, you should be so ashamed. Oh man, you are dirty. I can't believe you promised you'd never do that again. And you think you just have to sit in it. Proverbs 3:5 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding, but in all you do, acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight." That last part, in all you, see, our own understanding is when we start to make God like our human relationships. If you do something really bad to somebody else, we've come to expect, well, they're not going to be my friend anymore. They're not going to talk to me. They're not going to want me around. They're going to get other people to hate me. And so we project that onto God. That is our own understanding. Don't lean on your understanding, but in all you do, acknowledge him. Acknowledge that God is different. Acknowledge that God is different than your friend who will abandon you. Acknowledge that God is different than a parent who holds this over your head and won't forget about it. Acknowledge that God is different. Acknowledge God's love for you, and he will make your path straight. We all want to go the right direction. When we don't know which direction that is, we need to pray and ask for wisdom. We need to seek counsel from other people who will pray for us and give us godly wisdom. And we need to acknowledge God, realize we can't do it ourselves, and trust that he will make our path straight. See, the son, ultimately, what coming home meant was that he had to trust in the goodness of the Father. So I'd ask you, do you trust in the goodness of God? Have you been so busy blaming him for your situation that you haven't stopped to consider how actions that you have taken because you're like, I just want to do this, have brought you to that place? And have you been avoiding him because you feel like, I've messed up too bad, or I've messed up too many times? He doesn't want you to avoid him. Had the son stayed away, it would have broken the father's heart. And the father was so thankful that the son had come back, that he was willing to accept him in all his dirt and all his screw-ups and all the things that other people may have rejected. The father was willing to receive. That is God. And he is willing to receive us. Not once we've got our act together and we're doing all the things we're supposed to do. Right now, right where you're at.